About 7 years ago, I graduated from college without having a job lined up. Ever since I was young, I was the type who wouldn't do anything unless I was cornered, the kind who always crammed for tests the night before. So I just kept telling myself, well, it'll all work out somehow, and continued working part-time. That summer, I was hanging out at home with my no-good friend Kazuya, pseudonym. For some reason, in the midst of our lazy conversation, we got to talking about crossing Japan by hitchhiking. We started getting really fired up about that plan. Before I go any further, let me briefly introduce this no-good friend. Kazuya went to the same university as I did, and we got to know each other at the start of freshman year. He's a ridiculous womanizer, the kind who basically functions with his head and his lower half disconnected. Still, he's bright and cheery to the core, and he's totally straightforward, so even though he often got into trouble over women, he had a lot of male friends. Among them, I got along best with him. Personality-wise, we're almost complete opposites. I'm not nearly as outgoing as he is, but for some reason, we clicked. Let's get back to the hitchhiking plan. Though I call it a plan, it was really pretty slapdash. The idea was to first fly to Hokkaido, then hitchhike all the way back to our hometown in Kyushu. Kazuya, in classic womanizer fashion, also had a crass ulterior motive. I'm gonna hook up with at least one woman in every region I pass through. Honestly, I was partly hoping for something like that, too, not just the fun of the trip. Kazuya had long hair tied back, and he sort of looked like a suave bartender at a glance. In reality, he worked part-time at a club. I'd gone out to pick up girls with him before and actually had some success, so I couldn't exactly deny his logic. Anyway, we requested long vacations from our part-time jobs. I was planning to quit mine anyway since I wanted to look for a different job, so I ended up quitting, and Kazuya got a leave of absence. We bought plane tickets to Hokkaido, filled huge backpacks with clothes, cash, and other necessities, and a mere 3 weeks later, we were on a plane. We arrived in Sapporo, had lunch, and strolled around the city. Maybe it was because I wasn't used to flying, but by evening, I was exhausted and went back to the hotel. Kazuya disappeared into the nightlife. He didn't come back that night, and I caught up with him again the next morning in the hotel lobby. He was smirking and making an OK sign with his fingers. It looked like he'd successfully hooked up with some girl he'd picked up last night. And so, our hitchhiking journey finally began. It was the first time for both of us, and we were pretty excited. We didn't have any solid plan like, we need to cover X distance by X day. It was more like, well, let's just get as far as the next place someone's willing to take us. But as you might expect, no one stopped for us right away. We tried for about an hour without any luck. We were talking about how maybe people would be more likely to stop at night, when finally, about an hour and a half in, the first car stopped. It was only going within the same city, but at least it was heading south, so we covered some distance. Even a short ride was exciting that first time. It turned out our hunch about getting picked up more at night wasn't entirely wrong. The ones who picked us up most often were long-haul truckers. Not only were they traveling long distances, but none of them were shady folks, and it was a pretty efficient way to hitch a ride. By the third day, we'd gotten the hang of it. We'd decided to bring small gifts for the people giving us rides, cigarettes for truckers, candy for regular drivers. We stocked up at convenience stores in advance. The cigarettes, in particular, were a big hit. Whenever we rode with someone in a normal passenger car, thanks to Kazuya's talkative nature, the conversation was always lively, and the car would be full of laughter. Sometimes we got picked up by 2 or 3 girls traveling together, and to be frank, we sometimes managed to have some fun, too. By the 4th day, we'd made it to Honshu. We'd gotten the knack for things, and we had enough leeway to enjoy the local specialties wherever we passed through, savoring the one-chance encounters with the people who gave us rides. We tried to find a public bath almost every day so we could stay clean, and we made a rule to spend the night at an internet cafe every other day to keep our costs down. We were sometimes lucky enough to be invited to stay at a driver's home, which was always a lifesaver. But about 2 weeks after we set out, in the deep countryside of the Koshin region, the mountainous area in central Japan, we had an experience so terrifying that it would leave both of us traumatized for life. When a bunch of guys get together, Kazuya always starts singing vulgar songs. That night was no exception. He started belting out his dirty tunes. We were stranded on a deserted roadside convenience store parking lot for about 2 hours since our last ride, and the oppressive heat had us both in a miserable state. Maybe because of the heat and fatigue, we were in this weird, hyper mood. This sucks, man. Getting dropped off at some rundown country convenience store like this, Kazuya said, He might have had a point. The person who dropped us off said his house was about 10 minutes away by car, so maybe we should have asked if we could stay over. But there was no way to know exactly where his house was, so it was pointless to dwell on it. It was just after midnight. We decided to take turns every 30 minutes, one of us would stand outside trying to thumb a ride, while the other cooled off inside the convenience store. When we explained the situation to the store manager, he said, "Hang in there. If you get stuck, I can drive you to the city." You've gotta love the warmth of country folks. Even after another hour and a half, we still hadn't managed to flag down a single car. Actually, hardly any cars were even passing by. Kazuya had gotten pretty chummy with the manager, and just when we were about to ask if we could take him up on his offer, a camper van pulled into the parking lot. That was the start of the nightmare I will never forget. A man who looked to be in his 60s got out of the driver's seat and walked into the convenience store. He was dressed in this strange outfit, a wide-brimmed cowboy-style hat paired with a suit. I happened to be inside the store at the time, and I watched him without any real suspicion. He tossed tons of bandages and other first aid supplies into his basket, and he even grabbed two 1.5-liter bottles of cola, dropping them in with a thud. While he was at the register paying, I could sense him staring intensely at me as I stood there pretending to browse through a magazine. I felt uncomfortable, but I ignored him. Eventually, the man left the store. When I went out to switch with Kazuya, I saw him talking with the man in the parking lot. Hey, he's gonna give us a ride. Apparently, that's what was happening. At first, I thought there was something creepy about him, but up close, he seemed like just a harmless older guy. I was so tired and sleepy that I couldn't think straight. My logic was basically, oh, he's into the outdoors, hence the camper van, so maybe that's why he wears that hat. The moment I actually climbed into the camper, though, my instincts screamed, something's wrong. It's hard to put into words, what's wrong? It just is. Maybe it was purely a gut feeling. The driver had family inside. Of course, since it was a camper van, I'd expected there might be other passengers, but father, the driver, about 60-something. Mother, in the passenger seat, looked about 70-something. Twin sons, both clearly over 40. When people see something that defies their expectations, their minds just go blank for a moment. The first thing that registered in my eyes was these middle-aged twins, wearing the exact same gingham shirt, the exact same slacks, the exact same shoes, and sporting the exact same hairstyle, balding on top. Even their faces were identical. They were both sitting in the exact same posture. Kazuya looked stunned. It's not like having twins in their 40s is inherently bizarre or evil in itself, but there was something indescribably eerie about the atmosphere. "Have a seat," said the father. We were practically swallowed up by that family's vibe, so we just sat down in silence. We greeted them, and the father, still driving, started telling us a bit about his family. When the mother was sitting in the passenger seat facing forward, I hadn't gotten a good look at her, but she was off. She wore something like a wedding dress, a pure white summer dress. Her face was caked in white makeup like a comedy sketch. And the final blow was her name, Saint Josephine. The father, meanwhile, was Saint George. As for the twins, I was lost for words. Their names were Red and Blue. The older one's face was flushed red, so he was red. The other had a bluish birthmark on his cheek, so he was blue. I thought, who in their right mind would name their kids that? By this point, Kazuya and I were exchanging looks, and we'd pretty much decided to find a chance to bail as soon as possible. These people were nuts. The father and mother did most of the talking, and we half-heartedly answered, clearly distracted. The twins never spoke a word. They moved in perfect sync, slugging cola straight from the bottles, even letting out burps at exactly the same time. That moment made the hair on my neck stand on end, and I realized I'd hit my limit. Thanks for giving us a ride. We can get off around here. Not even 15 minutes had passed when Kazuya spoke up. But the father kept insisting we stay, while the mother kept saying stuff like, not tonight or tomorrow either. There are bears out there, complete nonsense. We both kind of lifted our butts off the seat and tried to insist, no, really, we're fine, but the father said, at least have dinner with us, refusing to stop the van. It was nearly 2 in the morning, what dinner could he be talking about? The twins, meanwhile, were still silent, now sucking on lollipops in unison. This is seriously messed up, Kazuya whispered. I nodded. The father and mother wouldn't stop talking to us, so we couldn't really strategize openly. At one point, I didn't catch what the father said, and he roared, "You heard me, didn't you?" in a terrifying voice. Right then, The twins burst out laughing in perfect sync. That's when we were absolutely sure this was very, very bad. Finally, the camper van turned off the highway and onto a mountain road, and we both jumped up in panic. "Excuse us, really, we can get off here. Thanks for everything." I leaned forward toward the driver's seat. But the father kept going on and on about how they had dinner ready, and the mother chimed in about how delicious it was and how we shouldn't miss it. We whispered back and forth that, if it came down to it, we'd make a run for it. Of course, it was too dangerous to jump out while the van was moving, so we agreed to bolt as soon as it stopped. After about 30 minutes of winding along a narrow mountain road, the camper van finally pulled over near a small river in an open clearing. "We're here," the father said. And then, from the door at the back of the camper, the one we had assumed was the toilet, we heard a hee-hee. Kind of giggling. Someone else was in there? My stomach dropped. "Hey, Mamoru must be hungry too, right?" the mother said. Mamoru? At least that was a real-sounding name. Maybe a little kid? Then, for the first time, the twins spoke in unison. "Don't you dare let Mamoru out." In these weird drawn-out voices. "Yes, Mamoru is very frail," the mother responded. "Bwah ha ha ha." The father suddenly roared with laughter. "This is it. These guys are fully unhinged," Kazuya said under his breath, using one of his slang terms for people who were completely off the rails. We got out of the van. Looking around, there was another man down by the river where a campfire was burning. Another one? At that point, we were pretty much in despair. This guy was huge, close to 2 meters tall, probably. Like the father, he wore a cowboy hat and a suit, which made him look even more bizarre. The brim of his hat was pulled low so we couldn't see his face. In the glow of the flames, the large cross painted on the camper's front looked even creepier. He was whistling the Mickey Mouse March while carving up something with a large knife. Judging by the fur, it was some kind of animal, maybe a wild boar or a stray dog. Either way, I sure as hell didn't want to eat it. Our plan to run was paralyzed by the sudden appearance of this giant and his giant knife. "Come on, take a seat," the father said brightly. The huge man set aside the knife and started adding seasoning to the pot that was bubbling away by the fire. I've gotta take a leak," Kazuya said. I knew he really meant, "Let's escape." I decided to go with him. "Hurry back," the mother said. As we moved past the camper, headed into the trees, suddenly the back window burst open and something slammed itself against the glass, something with a grossly protruding forehead, eyes set way too low on its face, and puffed up balloon-like hands. "Mama!" It screeched. That was it for us. We bolted into the woods as fast as we could. The father and mother shouted something after us, but I couldn't make it out, nor did I care. "Holy shit, holy shit, holy shit," Kazuya kept mumbling as we ran through the trees. We both stumbled and fell a bunch of times. Our only thought was to keep running downward, hoping to reach some road. From the clearing, we had seen lights in the distance that looked fairly close, but after an hour of frantic running, we still hadn't seen any sign of civilization. We had obviously gotten lost. Our hearts were pounding, our legs and arms were about to give out, and we finally collapsed where we stood. "You think they're coming after us?" Kazuya asked. "Hard to say. We're not exactly dinner to them, or anything. I doubt they'd bother. It's not like we're in a horror movie. They're just some messed up weirdos." That last freaky guy at the window nearly made me piss myself though. "What about our stuff? We at least have our money and phones on us. Guess we'll have to kiss the rest goodbye." Damn, this is crazy. Right? I guess our nerves were so shot that the insanity of it all just struck us as funny. We burst out laughing. But the thick smell of the forest and the pitch-black darkness quickly brought us back to reality. We'd escaped the insane family, but if we got lost out there, we'd be in real trouble. Even though it wasn't some famously dangerous sea of trees, we still worried about the worst-case scenario. Should we just wait till morning? That old lady said something about bears. Even if she's full of crap, there could be wild dogs or something. I wanted to get out of there as soon as possible, but stumbling around in pitch darkness might lead us right back to the clearing with that family, which was unthinkable. So we found a fallen tree trunk and sat down to rest. We were jabbering back and forth at first, but the extreme stress and fatigue took over, and we both started nodding off. Suddenly, I snapped awake. Instinctively, I checked my phone. 4 a.m. The sky was just starting to lighten. I looked to my side and realized Kazuya wasn't there. Startled, I looked around and saw him standing right behind me. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Oh, you're awake. Listen, can't you hear that?" He was clutching a wooden stick as if on guard. "Hear what dash?" Somewhere off in the distance, we heard a faint sound. It was whistling, the Mickey Mouse March. It was hauntingly clear, like something you could record on a CD. But for us, it might as well have been the theme song of horror. That's the big guys? Yeah. He's looking for us. We started running again through the forest as fast as we could. By now, the increasing daylight meant we could see a bit better. Not tripping over roots so often let us move at a much faster pace. After maybe 20 minutes, we ended up in a slightly open area, some old, unused parking lot. Through the trees, we could see a faint outline of a town below. We had finally come down quite a ways, it seemed. Kazuya complained that his stomach hurt and he couldn't hold it. There was an old, rundown restroom in the corner of the deserted parking lot. I needed to go a bit too, but the thought of being stuck in a stall when the giant might show up at any moment was terrifying. So I said I'd keep watch outside while Kazuya went in. Dude, there's toilet paper, but it's all stiff and covered in mosquitoes. Ugh. Better than nothing, I guess, Kazuya shouted from inside the stall, griping as he did his business. Then he yelled, "Hey! Don't you hear someone crying?" From inside the stall. Huh? Yeah, it's coming from the women's side, I think. Like a girl crying. Once he mentioned it, I finally heard it too. Somebody was crying on the women's side. Kazuya and I went quiet. Could there be a woman alone in some rundown toilet in the mountains, crying? What on earth happened to her? Hey! Can you check it out? She's crying way harder now. I was pretty creeped out, but if there was really a girl alone in these mountains, sobbing in a grimy restroom stall, she might be in real trouble. I made up my mind and went into the women's restroom. The crying was coming from one particular stall. I called out. "Excuse me. Are you okay?" No answer, just crying. "Are you sick? Excuse me, are you alright?" The sobbing got louder, but I never got any reply. At that moment, we heard the sound of a car coming down the road from above. "Get out here." I suddenly had a really bad feeling and rushed out of the women's restroom, knocking on Kazuya's stall door. "What's up?" "There's a car, man. And if it's those freaks." "Oh, got it." A few seconds later, Kazuya came out, pale-faced, still pulling up his jeans. Sure enough, a camper van was driving into the parking lot. This is the worst. If we tried to dash out of the lot and down the mountain road, we'd definitely be spotted by that creepy family. Our only option was to hide behind the restroom, which was just out of their line of sight. We had no time to worry about the girl anymore, our own survival came first. "Please, just drive on by. Don't stop here. Don't stop. Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, did they see us?" Kazuya whispered in a rush. But the camper van stopped its engine in the parking lot. We heard a door open, and footsteps approach the toilets. There was a 5-meter drop right behind the restroom, a small cliff. We barely had room to stand. There was no reason for them to come around behind the building unless they were specifically looking for us. If they did come, we'd have to jump. It wasn't that high, so we probably wouldn't die. But we'd definitely risk injury. We just prayed that they really did just need to use the toilet. But the crying from the women's side never stopped. All I could think about was what might happen to that poor girl if the family found her. Someone entered the men's side. From their voice, it seemed to be the father. "Ah, this feels good. Hallelujah. Hallelujah," he said, presumably while taking a leak. Then we heard multiple sets of footsteps, probably the twins, enter a stall or stalls. Surely they had to notice the crying girl in the women's restroom, right? But we didn't hear them do anything about it. We heard the mother complaining, "There's no toilet paper." The girl was still sobbing intensely in the women's restroom. Yet the family did nothing. Soon, the father and twins left the men's side. Strange. They had to have heard that girl, but they seemed totally uninterested. We heard them talking outside, their voices moving farther away. Then the father said, "We'll wait for Tilda to come. They'll be here soon," though we couldn't catch who or what Tilda was. It sounded like the twins were whining about something, and then there was a sharp slapping sound, followed by what I assumed was the twins crying. It was also twisted. We used to think hitchhiking would be all fun and adventure. Why had it come to this? I was starting to feel not just fear, but anger at this crazed family. "Let's steal that camper and drive down the mountain. Even if we have to beat the crap out of them," Kazuya said quietly. "That big guy might not be here right now. They're waiting for someone, right? That's probably him." It was tempting. But I figured they didn't know we were hiding here, so better to stay put and let them leave. Besides, I couldn't just forget about the crying girl. If the family left, we could open her stall or something. Kazuya grudgingly agreed. About 15 minutes later, we heard someone in the distance say, "They're here." Though we couldn't make out the name. The family started talking excitedly, apparently the one they'd been waiting for had arrived. We heard footsteps approach the restrooms again. A whistle. The Mickey Mouse March. It was the big guy. He was apparently using the men's side, whistling all the while. The girls' sobbing turned into hysterical screaming, like a final death cry, and then, in an instant, it stopped. Did they find her? Did they do something? But the big guy was clearly in the men's side, and we never heard anyone enter the women's side. Soon, the big guy left, still whistling, and rejoined the group. Worried that they might have dragged the girl out, I risked poking my head around the corner to check. I saw the big guy's back, the cowboy hat and suit, walking away. Was it here? Huh? Was it here? He suddenly yelled. I jerked my head back out of sight. Had we been discovered? Kazuya gripped his wooden stick tightly. Yeah. It was so sinful, wasn't it? The father and mother's voices. Then the twins' laughter. She was screaming, wasn't she? The giant roared. Yes. She was screaming. She repented. Hallelujah. The father and mother again, and the twins cackling. What the hell were they talking about? It didn't seem to involve us. Then the camper van's engine started up. Soon, it drove off. Once we were sure they were gone, I rushed into the women's restroom. I opened every stall, but there was no one. The locks on all the doors were broken. Impossible. Kazuya came in behind me and tapped my shoulder. Hey, you were suspecting it too, right? There was never any girl here to begin with. So both of us were hearing things? But it was so vivid. Then again, the family hadn't reacted at all to her crying. That might support the idea that the crying was just some hallucination we both experienced. It hardly made sense, but I couldn't come up with another explanation. From the parking lot, we could see a road leading up the mountain and one going down. Taking the road down would likely lead us back to the main highway, but we risked running into that family's camper again. So we chose to walk through the forest. The town didn't look that far, and it was daylight now, so the risk of getting lost was much lower. We walked in silence for 2 hours or so until we finally reached a national highway. We had no spare clothes, no luggage. The one thing that came to mind was that store manager back at the convenience store. The highway wasn't exactly bustling, but there was enough traffic. After what we'd been through, hitchhiking again took some courage, but eventually a truck driver let us hop in. He seemed kind of confused by our disheveled appearance at first, but when we briefly explained we'd gotten lost while camping, he warmed up and gave us a ride. We couldn't exactly tell him the whole story, who would believe us? Luckily, he said he knew that convenience store and sometimes stopped there. About an hour later, we arrived. The manager was there, and we told him what had happened with that camper family, though not in every bizarre detail. As we explained, he got this puzzled look on his face. Huh? A camper van? Well, I saw you two leave the store on foot, walking along the highway. I did call after you, you know. I thought maybe you felt bad making me drive you, so you decided to walk. I followed you for about 10 meters, trying to talk to you, but you guys were ignoring me so completely that it kind of ticked me off. What was up with that? Laughs. What was he talking about? We'd definitely seen that camper van pull in, watch the man buy stuff, and pay at the register, this store manager's register. There was also a young part-timer behind the counter, but apparently that kid had gone home for the night. Could the manager be in on it too? A chill ran through us as Kazuya and I exchanged glances. Excuse us, we need to use the restroom, Kazuya said, dragging me to the store's bathroom. What do you think? I asked. Could the manager be lying? But why would he do that? Is everyone in on some elaborate plan to mess with us? That makes no sense. It's all so weird. Let's just be safe and ask that trucker to drive us back into town. That seemed like the best choice. We agreed, and just as we turned to leave the restroom, we heard whistling again, the Mickey Mouse March, accompanied by the sound of a toilet flushing in one of the stalls. My fear and my anger shot up in equal measure. It seemed to be the same for Kazuya. Open up, he yelled, banging on the door. The door opened. What the? Yelled a startled high school kid in his uniform. Oh. Sorry. Ha, Kazuya said, laughing awkwardly. Fortunately, our little outburst hadn't drawn attention outside. After apologizing to the kid, we returned to the truck driver and the store manager, who were chatting at the counter. You wouldn't be causing any trouble for me. But sure, I don't mind giving you a ride, the driver said. Kazuya put a carton of his favorite cigarettes on the counter and thanks, sealing the deal. To be honest, we had zero intention of going to the police about that insane family. The whole thing was too surreal, and we just wanted to move on. Sure, we were bummed about losing our backpacks, but oh well. It turned out the driver was heading toward the city anyway, which worked perfectly for us. He was in a great mood after getting the free cigarettes, and he cruised along while we dozed in the cab. When I woke up, the truck had stopped at a rest area. The driver had bought 3 servings of yakisoba and brought them back, so we ate them in the truck together. Kazuya fell asleep again after eating, but I couldn't drift off, so I stared out the window, recalling that nightmare and wondering what on earth it had all been about. Just then, "Ah!" I shouted involuntarily. "What's wrong?" the driver asked. "Could you pull over, please?" "Huh? Sorry, this'll just take a second. Are you seriously getting out here? We haven't reached the city yet," he grumbled, but he did stop on the shoulder. By then, Kazuya had woken up, too. "What is it?" "Look over there," I said, pointing. Kazuya followed my gaze, then froze. In a rundown, abandoned rest area sat that very same camper van. The same color, same shape, same big cross on the front. But something was off. The van looked like it had been rotting away for decades, rusted and beat up, all the tires flat, all the windows broken. "Give us 5 minutes, okay?" I asked the driver. "We'll be right back." Reluctantly, he nodded and waited with the truck's engine idling. "What's going on?" Kazuya muttered. I had no clue. We approached the camper and confirmed it was definitely the same one as before. But it was like it had aged 30 or 40 years. "I'm going to open it," I said, prying the rusty door. A foul smell wafted out. "Dude, look, our backpacks," Kazuya yelled. Sure enough, there were our 2 backpacks. We'd left them behind when we bolted from the van. Yet now they were crumbling away, as if they'd been sitting there for decades. The clothes and toiletries inside were also rotted. "What the hell is this?" Kazuya repeated, voice trembling. My brain couldn't process it. I just wanted to get away from that cursed camper as fast as possible. "Let's get out of here," I said, my voice shaking. Kazuya, also terrified, nodded. Just then, we heard a thump from behind the door at the back of the camper. We'd assumed it was a bathroom door, but we'd never opened it. I was half out of my mind with panic, maybe it was just a cat or something. But in that moment, it sounded like, "Ma, Ma." We screamed and sprinted back to the truck. The driver's face looked a little pale too. Without a word, he stepped on the gas and we pulled away. After a few silent minutes, we all started talking at once. "What happened? Did something happen to you?" we asked simultaneously. The driver forced a laugh. "Don't know if I was just seeing things, but that old wreck. There was nobody else around, right? Well, obviously there shouldn't be. But for a second, I could have sworn I saw a figure in a cowboy hat, like one of those hats Boy Scouts wear, if we're talking Japanese style. And the moment I got that weird chill, I swear I heard whistling right by my ear." "What kind of whistling was it?" Kazuya asked. "Don't know the song, but it went like this," he imitated the melody. It was the Mickey Mouse March. The next half hour passed with the driver and us in tense silence. As we got close to the city, I decided to ask him what I'd been wondering the whole time. "Hey, about that mountain near the highway where you picked us up." "Oh, that? What about it? Have there been any incidents there? Like something serious?" "Incidents? Haven't heard of much. There are 3 or 4 mountains in that area, though." "Oh, but I do recall that a young woman was murdered there, like, decades ago? That's about it, I think. Otherwise it's just stories about wild boars. Nasty creatures, let me tell ya." "Was that woman murdered? Maybe near a restroom?" Kazuya piped up, cutting me off. "Yeah, I think so." "How'd you know that?" "The trucker eventually dropped us in the city. Finally, I felt safe enough to relax, and we spent that night in a hotel, sleeping like the dead. 1 or 2 days later, we took the bullet train back home to Kyushu. It was a nightmare I'd rather erase from my mind. But once in a while, I still remember. Who were those people? Were they real lunatics? Were they phantoms? Or were they not of this world? And that crying girl in the restroom, what was that? And how do you explain the camper van that had rotted away, along with our bags, as if decades had passed?" Kazuya's been in a great mood ever since a recent group date went well. We still hang out sometimes, same as ever. His bright, carefree personality was a huge comfort to me in dealing with that horrific experience. We're pushing 30 now, but we've been employed for quite a while, and life is pretty normal. Kazuya still can't handle the sight of camper vans, though. I have a trauma about that Mickey Mouse march. Chan Laran Chan Laran Chan Laran Laran Chan Laran Chan Laran Chan Laran Laran. At that recent group date, one of the girls had that song as her ringtone, and my heart nearly stopped. I still have nightmares sometimes about that family, especially the giant man whistling that melody.